Welcome to Magnificat TV news program dedicated to providing news from the Church. Today is Wednesday, June 28, 2023, and these are our headlines. The Instrumentus Laboris of the next Synod, to be held in Rome in October and dedicated to synodality, has been presented in Rome. The French scientist and writer Blaise Pascal has been subject of an apostolic letter from the Pope, highlighting his deep faith and spirituality of the heart. The Pope has recognized the heroic virtues of Sister Lucia of Fatima, who has been declared venerable. The next step will be beatification. 4 bishops have decided not to finance the agreement adopted by the German Synod, which has been momentarily blocked. The president of the Polish Episcopate has warned Catholic politicians that anyone who votes in favor of abortion will be immediately excommunicated. It is now known what will be the working material on which discussions will begin at the next Synod, to be held in Rome in October.
The Instrumentum Laboris of the Synod on Synodality has been presented in Rome. It is 50 pages long and discusses essential aspects of the Church's moral and sacramental theology. One of the questions to be discussed is this: what concrete steps can the Church take to renew and reform its procedures, institutional arrangements, and structures so that they allow for greater recognition and participation of women, including in governance and decision-making processes, in a spirit of communion and in view of mission? The possibility is also raised that the Church's sexual morality should be changed so that the exercise of homosexuality is recognized as valid. Another issue is access to communion for remarried divorcees and unmarried cohabitants, as well as the possibility of communion for polygamists.
Blaise Pascal, the enemy of the Jesuits, has been vindicated by the first Jesuit Pope in history with an apostolic letter dedicated to the French thinker.
The Holy See has published Pope Francis' apostolic letter Sublimitas et Miseria Hominis on the French philosopher and scientist Blaise Pascal, written on the occasion of the 400th anniversary of his birth. Tireless seeker of truth, brilliant thinker, attentive to the material needs of all, in love with Christ, Christian of exceptional rationality and immense and restless intelligence, and just some of the Pope's definitions of the French philosopher. Francis recalls that throughout his life, Pascal searched for truth and with reason traced its signs, especially in the fields of mathematics, geometry, physics, and philosophy. In a century of great scientific progress, he showed himself to be a tireless seeker of truth, always restless, attracted by new and more distant horizons, he said. It is touching, Francis writes, that a brilliant thinker like Pascal, at the end of his life, saw no other urgency beyond putting his energies into works of mercy. The only object of Scripture is charity. Pascal, a man of prodigious intelligence, was concerned to let everyone know that God is truth and inseparable, but also that outside the perspective of love, there is no truth that counts. The Pope is convinced that the intelligence and living faith of Pascal, who wanted to show that the Christian religion is venerable because it has known man well, and also lovable because it promises true good, can help us to advance through the darkness and misfortunes.
Sister Lucia of Fatima is already venerable. The other 2 shepherds who saw Our Lady are already saints, but that is because they died very young.
Pope Francis has recognized the heroic virtues of the servant of God, Lucia dos Santos, a Portuguese nun belonging to the Discount Carmelite order, who, together with her cousins, Jacinta and Francisco Marto, saw Our Lady in Fatima on several occasions between May and October 1917. The Holy Father decided this after meeting with the prefect of the Dicastery for the Causes of Saints, Cardinal Marcelo Semeraro, and authorized the promulgation of the decree recognizing these heroic virtues of the Portuguese nun. The process of beatification continues, and it is now necessary for a miracle to be produced and approved through the intercession of the Venerable Sister Lucia for her to be beatified, and subsequently, and with another miracle, to be canonized, as Francisco and Jacinta have already been. Sister Lucia was born in 1907 in a village near Fatima. In 1921, she entered the school of the Dorothean sister in the town of Vilar, near Porto, from where she moved in 1928 to a Spanish city of Tours, where she lived for some years. In 1946, she returned to Portugal and 2 years later entered the Carmelite convent of Coimbra, where she was professed as a discount Carmelite in 1949. She died on 13 February 2005 in the same Carmelite monastery.
4 German bishops have decided not to finance the implementation of what was agreed at the German Synod, which has been blocked for the time being.
Cardinal Wolke of Cologne and the 3 Bavarian bishops, Hanke of Eichstätt, Oster of Passau, and Vodeshoxer of Rendsburg, voted against financing the Synodal Committee that is to introduce a permanent German Synodal Council to oversee the Church in Germany. The argument is clear. No money should be put into something that Rome can refuse. The German Bishops' Conference issued a statement saying that for a large majority of diocesan bishops, it is important that the 15 decisions of the Synodal Assembly are implemented as soon as possible. However, the statement continued, since a unanimous decision of the bishops is needed and 4 bishops have declared that they will not agree to further funding of the synodal way, it is now necessary to find other forms of funding. One of the key issues will be the funding of the controversial projects, given that the synodal way has already cost several $1 million. Although funding figures for the 3-year Synod Commission have not been made public, German Bishops' Conference spokesman Matthias Kopp said in May that 5.5 million euros had been spent on the synodal way during its initial 3-year phase of assemblies. On Tuesday, the 4 bishops who voted against funding the synodal committee said in a joint press release that the plan to now organize a synodal committee in Germany, which would then establish a synodal council, goes against the clear instruction of the Pope. Therefore, we cannot go ahead with this step at this time.
The Polish bishops have not hesitated to declare that any politician who votes in favor of abortion will be immediately excommunicated.
The president of the Polish Bishops' Conference, Bishop Gadecki, has made it clear. Members of parliament who vote in favor of abortion commit a grave sin and therefore cannot receive communion. His statements come after Poland's main opposition parties, most of whose leaders are practicing Catholics, have expressed support for ending the current near-total ban on abortion, which is supported by the Church. Human life is sacred and inviolable in all its dimensions and conditions, said Gadecki, Archbishop of Poznan and President of the Polish Bishops' Conference at the annual March for Life and Family. However, this right to life is today more often threatened by economic interest. A law that violates a child's natural right to life is unjust, and any member of parliament who votes against life commits a grave sin and therefore cannot receive communion. In 2020, Poland's Constitutional Tribunal issued a ruling protecting the life of the unborn and banning abortions justified by the diagnosis of severe congenital defects in the fetus, which previously accounted for 98% of legal abortions in Poland. Abortion is now only allowed in 2 cases: when the pregnancy endangers the health or life of the mother, or when it is the result of a criminal act such as rape or incest. The Church strongly supported the content of the ruling and was therefore one of the targets of the mass protests that erupted in the wake of the court decision. Donald Tusk, leader of the Centric Civic Platform, the largest opposition party, has called for the legalization of free abortion up to the 12th week of pregnancy.
Our editorial this week is dedicated and commenting on, among other things, the declaration of Sister Lucia of Fatima as venerable.
This week, the instrument laboris of the next synod was presented. We must begin by clarifying 2 things. First, we cannot properly speak of a synod of bishops, but a synod with bishops, even if they are the majority of the members of the synod, because in the next synod, which will be held on October, in the next synod, there will also be lay participants, priests, religious, who, like the bishops, will have the right to speak and vote. We are in the first time in which the synod ceases to be a synod of bishops. I say properly speaking, regardless of the title given to it, to become a synod with bishops. Second thing, what is an instrumentum laboris? It is, as the word himself indicates, a working instrument, a draft which, as has happened on previous occasions, is destined to be destroyed in debates, to be extensively corrected, by which already indicates the line of the topics to be dealt with, the line of the topics to be discussed. And when one sees this instrumentum laboris, which is extensive, it has 50 pages. The impression of one has is one of déjà vu, something already seen. We have been talking about the same thing for almost 10 years. Marriage of priests, woman priests, acceptance of the practice of homosexuality, acceptance of communion to the divorce and remarry, and also to couples living without marriage in free union. And this time and nobility is included. Acceptance to communion of polygamy, of polygamous. Well, in short, it is more of the same. We must then think about 2 things. First, if in a previous synod, I am thinking for the example of the synod of the Amazon, nothing of what was requested and approved by the majority was accepted in practice, such as some natives who lived in remote situations, in areas far from civilization, where it is difficult for a priest to arrive, that those married natives can be ordained priests. Well, if that has now been approved as a petition of the Synod of Amazon, in a very local and very restricted environment, why does all this have to be approved now? Besides, part of what appears in the Instrumentum Laboris is a copy from German Synod. There are exceptions. For example, in the German Synod, there is a talk of the synodal councils composed of lay people and bishops, whose decision-making power will be above of the bishops. The bishop will be just another voice. This does not appear in the Instrumentum Laboris. It has been explicitly voted in German case by the Vatican. In the German Synod, the question of polygamy does not appear either. I don't know if it is an innovation that the Africans are asking for or who is asking for, but otherwise it is the same. And if the Germans have not been granted any of all those things they are asking for, or the Amazonians, what reason do we have to think that even if the Synod approves certain things, they are going to be granted? It is pitiful, it is regrettable that the essential truths of the faith that are part of our heritage based on the gospel and tradition are to put up for debate. It is regrettable. It is as if in a parliament, if you were to decide it by votes what is good and what is bad, and even the basic principles for the existence of the nation were decided by votes. It is painful and regrettable, but at the same time, it must be said that possibly we are in front of a typical case of much ado about nothing. The noise that has been produced for a long time, and that has been produced this week when the instrumentum laboris was made known, can overshadow, can hide other things that have also happened this week and that are very interesting. For example, Pope Francis, a Jesuit, has published an apostolic letter to vindicate the figure of the Blaise Pascal, the French scientist, inventor of the hydraulic press, the French great writer, author of the provincial letter in the thoughts, the deeply Catholic Frenchman, but the French moral enemy of the Jesuits. The provincial letters are a harsh attack against the Jesuits, the Frenchman of rigorous morality very close to the Jansenists. The Frenchman has been vindicated by the Jesuit, when traditionally the Jesuits have been enemies of moral rigorism that before the name of Jansenists. Although Jansenists had already died, when Jansenism began again strength, especially in French and Belgium. This is a positive fact, that it is a fact that honors Pope Francis. Surely some will not like to recognize it, but it is honors him. He has been able to highlight the positive aspects of a woman who was in the past one of the main enemies of the religious order to which he belongs, a man like Pascal, a man with many qualities, a scientist, a writer, a deeply religious man, who has left unforgettable phrases that are part of the Catholic spirituality and in intimate, profound way. The heart has reasons that the reason ignores, or reason is so weak that it does not understand that there are things that surpass it. It seems to me an extraordinary fact, the vindication of Pascal by a Jesuit pope. Or, for example, in the German Synod, the creation of the Synod Consult is voted, but money is needed to start them up. 4 bishops, 4 only, but 4 have stood up and said that they are not going to give the money, and if there is no unanimity, there is no money. They will have to look for other sources for financing, and they will look for it. But it is an important fact that a small minority of bishops is capable of saying no to what is being approved by a synod. And it is very important fact because it may be indicating to us a path of the future. A minority of bishops who refuse to apply what a synod approves and who in the end dismantle what the synod has approved. Another important fact that may go unnoticed this week, the Cardinal of Brussels, the Kessel, has been, or they have accepted his resignation only a year after he presented. It is not normal. The normal thing is that cardinals are left for 2 years. When this happens, it is usually said that they were eager to accept his resignation, and if he had been a conservative cardinal, it would surely have been said that he was a published man. But the Kessel, it is one of the most liberal cardinals, the most radical, at the level of the most radical that can exist within the College of Cardinals. he is in favor of absolutely everything that is required in the German Synod. Well, they have accepted his resignation after only a year. Well, it is true that they have to appoint as his successor his vicar general, who is supposed, therefore, to be very close to him ideologically and who is 54 years old. A young man with a lot of pontificate ahead, in the same line of as Buenos Aires and Madrid. But this new one, apart from the fact that H1 is H1, the fact it is the new one belongs to the little brothers of Focus, which is a very small but extraordinary congregation with a very deep spirituality, and that his first statement had been to affirm that only Christ is the master and that no one can be above Christ. These are declarations that I personally find extraordinary and marvelous, and that I endorse immediately, and that in the end are the basis of all criticism of morals and liturgy that is taking place in the entities such as Germany Synod and in their respective and another synod. Therefore, it is negative that they have removed the Gesell and put it in a man of his line. Time will tell, and time will tell if he is of the same line as in Madrid. Time will tell. For the moment, the first declarations of the Archbishop and the future Archbishop of Madrid, because he has not yet taken office, are excellent, and there is no reason, at least for the time being, to shake one's head and tear one's clothes. Another extraordinary event this week, the Pope has approved the heroic virtues of Sister Lucia of Fatima, the last of the visionaries of Fatima. That means that she has been declared venerable. That means that officially we can entrust ourselves to her. Unofficially, of course, we could do it before, but officially she is now venerable. The Venerable Sister Lucia of Fatima, this is very important. It is one more step for recognition that the Virgin really did intervene there. Our Lady spoke, and those things that Our Lady taught, including the existence of purgatory and hell, that those things must be taken seriously, not as if it meant that for that very reason or for the fact alone it is the truth of faith, but because it corroborates, reaffirms what we believe as true in faith, even if Our Lady had not appeared in Fatima, the existence of purgatory and hell. As for the Synod, the fact that the deposit of the faith is being discussed as in the Parliament is regrettable, but let us not allow our eyes to be filled with negative things, because there are many other good things that are happening and that perhaps in the long run will be more important. For the moment, I entrust myself to Sister Lucia of Fatima, to the Venerable Sister Lucia of Fatima, and ask her to intercede for the Church. Until next week, God willing.
We will continue to keep you informed of what is happening in the Church. In the meantime, you can check our website at www.magnificat.tv. See you next week, God willing.